for he looked for judgment, but behold oppression, for righteousness, but behold a cry. Woe unto them that join house to house, and lay field to field, till there be no place that they may be placed alone in the midst of the earth. In my ears, said the Lord of hosts, of a truth many houses shall be desolate.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing in the book of Isaiah. We're in chapter 5, verse 24. All right. Okay. Verse 24. And chapter 5 is about this, starts out with this parable about the vineyard. Well, it's kind of a parable. It's a little story. Not exactly a parable, but more of an analogy. He's got a vineyard, and he compares the vineyard to, an analogy and a parable are not so far off. There's a little difference, because it doesn't have to be, you don't need a pure analogy to tell a parable. But a parable could take the form of an analogy. So, he goes through and he compares them to the vineyard, and then goes through a couple of woes. Woe to them that rise up early in the morning to follow strong drink. Woe to those that lay house to house. Woe to those that draw iniquity with cords of vanity, right? Yeah. And woe to them that are mighty to drink wine. Woe to them that call evil good and good evil. Woe to them that are wise in their own eyes. These are all things that have led Israel to a point where their nation is falling apart. The civilization is collapsing around them, and they are weakened and ready to be invaded and taken into captivity. Verse 24 reads, Therefore, as the fire devoureth the stubble, and the flame consumeth the chaff, so their root shall be as rottenness, and their blossom shall go up as dust, because they have cast away the law of the Lord of hosts, and despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. 1 second. I may need to mute it a bunch of times today. So. Because of all this, all these sins that have been laid out in the rest of the chapter, as the fire devoureth the stubble would be the most, think of it as like, I was about to use it, and it's something I always hate when people say, think of it as kindling wood on steroids. I just realized my camera's way off. But, yeah, it is, I'm going to keep talking about, stubble just refers to the, like, when Paul talked about things being burned on the altar, he said wood, hay, and stubble. So I'm just going to shut down the camera. Wood, hay, and stubble. So, I mean, if it's somewhere beneath stubble. I mean, stubble is somewhere beneath hay in terms of fineness and flammability. And obviously, the fire devours the stubble. It does not pause even a little bit to let the stubble. Hold on a second. There we go. Go. That's close enough. Close enough. The visual component is obviously not that important. We don't want it to be so off it's distracting. It's even a little bit off, but that's alright. A little bit's okay. As I doubt you're trying to read my lips. Alright. The flame consumeth the chaff. Chaff again. Chaff is technically the leftover, at least usually it would be the leftover of the winnowing process. Like the way they would winnow grain is they would use a fork, a winnowing fork, and you would take the grain and you would put it on a floor, someplace where it's nice and flat, and maybe there's some wind, or where it's clean, and you flip the grain into the air to winnow it. You toss it up, and the wind will take away the husk material and all the other stuff, and that's known as the chaff. The chaff is the stuff that blows off the grain. Again, this is highly flammable material. So as the fire can devour the stubble, as the flame consumeth the chaff, so their root. We have double analogies here. We have, we're talking about flame consuming, as the flame. There's a metaphor on top of a metaphor. As the fire devoureth the stubble, so their root shall be as rottenness. See how it's a double? Because it's talking about, obviously, it's not a fire that's really going to consume them. It's something else that's acting like a fire. And also, it's not really, they don't have literal roots like trees. Their root is something representative of something else. Like we have roots. Human beings have roots. We put them down. And all kinds of things. Usually we talk about roots in English having to do, we usually use it, it's a very, it's a positive word. When we talk about, and it's not that it's bad here, but usually we say like, well, I'm thinking about setting down roots and maybe settling down here, And the idea is that, maybe you've been on the move and you want to put down roots, means it's like, I'm going to stay here and have a place and become tied to a location, a home. And some people don't do that for a long time in their lives. A lot of young men do not settle down. Certainly not early, in their 20s and stuff, and they have my ears. Can't hear a thing. Okay, there we go. They they tend to ramble, and it's not always bad. I mean, maybe they just work from place to place, or get a job that, like truck driving, that sort of is not particularly conducive to setting down roots. I know a lot of truck drivers are rooted, right? They have homes, but as you know, it's like it's hard to have a home when you're on the road all the time. It just is. It really, it's just a hard thing to keep up with and all that. And also, if you have a wife, being on the road all the time means you don't get to enjoy your wife a lot of the time, and so that's kind of a bummer. I always thought it was cute when married couples would drive trucks together. It's kind of sounds like the opposite of lonely. And their blossoms shall go up as the dust. But the idea of root is rottenness. Well, it certainly makes sense if you're thinking about it in terms of they're about to be uprooted. Whatever's holding them in place is not going to hold them in place. Now, when we talk about root, that idea of putting down roots, I don't think that's what the scripture has in mind. It has more that sense of the deep part, like when we talk about the heart, the root. When it talks about Messiah coming, he would spring up out of the root of Jesse. And it talks about other things in the New Testament. Like in the New Testament, it'll talk about lest a root of bitterness springing up, meaning like that there's some little leftover bit of bitterness in your heart, which, like some plants, when you cut them down to their roots, will come back. Some plants, you cut the top off, that's it, the plant dies. Certain kinds of trees, they don't come back. Some trees, if you don't remove that stump, you're going to have another come back, like mulberry and stuff like that. They grow like weeds. You can't just leave the stump. No matter how small, it will come back. Now, so that, it talks about roots of bitterness, right? So I understand, let me see if I can think of other examples of the root being used in the scripture. And we'll talk about what we think it might mean here. R-O-O-T. Oh. R-O-T-R-O-T. Well, that was just the New Testament. I limited my search to the New Testament. I wanted it all. 70 times exactly in the Bible. That's translations. If you look at here, let's bring it up. No, I'm on this. Seems weird, but there we go. Oh, on the side there. I'm going to just close this little window there. Thank you. Yeah, runtime error. Great, crashed. Thanks, Bible Collection. That's funny because it doesn't usually crash, even though it's quite an old piece of software. Okay. Find. It's already found them. Oh, maybe I better try finding something. There we go. Now I can close it. So, here in Deuteronomy 29, it talks about a root. Well, it says, lest there should be among you a man or woman, family or tribe, whose heart turneth away this day from the Lord your God, to go and serve the gods of these nations. Lest there should be among you a root that beareth gall and wormwood. And it come to pass, when he heareth the words of this curse, that he bless himself in his heart, saying, I shall have peace, though I walk in the imagination of my heart, to add drunkenness to thirst. The Lord will not spare him, etc. He shall blot out his name from under heaven. Okay. The curses, of course, it refers to the curses that would come upon them if they did not follow. And here's another reference to root that has kind of a negative connotation here. The Lord rooted them out of their land in anger and in wrath. And in great nation cast. I see. Well, oh, he's talking about what's going to happen to Israel after they forsake his covenant, which is what we're reading about in Isaiah. Here in Judges, out of Ephraim there was a root of them against Amalek, after thee Benjamin among thy people. It's kind of, it sounds like almost like is this a poem, the Song of Deborah and Barak? Yeah, this is a Song of Deborah and Barak. So she's calling to them, and here is a positive thing. They were rooted. He was rooted out of their land in anger. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Of course, it's not positive. I'm saying rooted differently. And the Lord rooted them out of their land. Uprooted is the word. We use the word uproot, but root, I guess they use both to indicate roots, and it's probably a different word in Hebrew. Actually, they're translating the word one way, but here it's a verb. Oh, I'm looking. No wonder. Root of them against. Oh no, no wonder. I was looking at Judges, which it is positive. I'm thinking of Deuteronomy 28, where rooted them is uprooted. And we talked about that. Deuteronomy 29, 28. 29, 28, Judges 5, Kings. He shall root up Israel out of the good land. The Lord shall smite Israel, and the remnant that is escaped out of the house of Judah shall take root downward and bear fruit upward. Then I will pluck them up by the roots out of my land. I have seen the foolish taking root, but I suddenly cursed his habitation. That was Job. Who knows who's talking there? Job, you gotta be careful, just because there is a debate going on in Job. His roots are wrapped about him in the heap. Did the root get old? I don't want to look at all the... Job has a lot of references to root. Really interesting. For it is a fire that consumeth to destruction, and would root out all mine increase. I think he's talking about there his sin. Let my wife... Oh, if my heart has been deceived, or if I have laid wait by my neighbor's door. Iniquity is a fire to be consumed. Root out all my increase. Whatever. I don't know if there's any... Thou preparest room for it to cause them to take deep root. Rooted out, root, the righteous yieldeth fruit. I like this though. The wicked desireth the net of evil men, but the root of the righteous yieldeth fruit. And there's the David. Out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice. I will kill thy root with famine, and he shall slay thy remnant. Sure. Isaiah 14. He shall take root. Oh, root of a dry ground. There's a lot of references to root. Length of the branches, roots, his roots, his roots. I probably didn't need to do any of this. I don't know. I was getting a bit bored there. Probably didn't need to go there, but it was interesting to me, the uses. So they're mostly using the mundane sense and of holding people where they are. And obviously, the way plants are held by roots, people are held by roots, in a sense. Like there's a mythical root, not mythical, like an imaginary root. That's what I want. Like I'm rooted here by certain things, But anyways, whatever's their ability to stay put is going to be like a rotten root. And this my camera isn't just not doing right; it's just chunky. It keeps freezing on me. See that? I wonder if that's on your end. Oh well. I can't think of any reason why it would be like that. Why it'd be freezing up. Yep, can't figure it out. That's weird. It's laggy. Okay. So, and so simply we can look at it like it's more than just what's holding them in place, though, I guess. I don't want to overanalyze it. To me, it's like rotten roots on a plant. That's it, man. It's bad. If you got rotten roots, I do gardening and stuff. If you rot the roots, the plant is going to die. It's bad for root. And also, when roots are rotten, they're easy to pluck up. If you've ever pulled plants out of the ground, if you've ever come across something that's the root has died and rotted away, it's like pluck. It's so easy to pluck out of the ground. And I think that's what it's saying is like, you guys are going into captivity, and it is not going to be hard for the enemy to get you there. You're going to have rotten roots. So it's going to be easy to pluck you up, easy to take you out of your land, easy to carry you away captive. Their roots will be as rotten as nothing to hold them there. And also, it speaks to a certain moral corruption also. Like if someone has rotten roots, it sort of says something like deep down inside is rotten. Like at the base of what, tethers them to any sense of being a normal human being, of being a righteous person, of being an upright person in society. Someone with, whose roots are going rotten. If you're thinking of that in a poetic sense, it's someone whose life is coming apart at the seams, so to speak. Like their roots are, it's like the places where they need to be firmly grounded are fraying apart. Where like if your basic family relationships are falling apart, you don't have, this tight, for them it's going to be their basic relationship with God is falling apart. They're not rooted and grounded in Him. In fact, that would have been the most helpful reference I could have looked up in terms of looking up scriptures on this subject. I didn't mean to close that. Actually, I did. I was hoping that would help the camera. But if we look at this again, the verse I would most likely like to point to. I knew there were a lot of root verses. Why is this not even coming up? That's weird. I don't have it on. Oh, that's different. Okay, I see the problem. Sorry, I'm an incompetent engineer or a amateur. All right. Roots. Rooted and grounded. We go to the New Testament. I am the root and offspring of David. The root of David, plucked up by the roots. The root of bitterness, the root of all evil. Money is the root of all evil. Rooted. Now here's look at Colossians 2:7. Rooted and built up in Him, and established in the faith. That Christ may dwell in your hearts by faith, that ye being rooted and grounded in love. And then root. There's a lot of interesting stuff with roots. It's a very important analogy. Yeah. The axe is laid to the root of the trees, because the root indicates the place where the thing is tethered to the ground reality. It's the life. It's the essential place where they take in nutrients. Roots are so important to trees. And when our roots go rotten, that's like, we are vulnerable. Just like a tree with rotten roots. What it's saying is deep down inside there's... Didn't catch it, right? It still went flying. There are, I forgot what I was saying. I don't know, because I sneezed. Anyways. Sorry. All right. So the root shall be his rottenness. The blossom should go, we want to be rooted and grounded in Christ. That implies that, there's something to put roots down into. And that's like God. They should have had their position in the land should not be rooted there just because they're there. But their occupation of the promised land was rooted in their covenant with God. And when the covenant was broken, they were uprooted. I spent way too much time on that. Oh well. Life goes on. Their blossom shall go up as dust. The flower that should have produced. And that's where the fruit comes from on a plant. Is the flower. The flowering plant brings forth the fruit. And when the blossom, the blossom is the promise of fruit, but the blossom dries out and crumbles. It can turn to dust. And you lose out on the fruit. And we can lose out on our fruit if we turn our backs on God, like the Israelites did. We turn our backs on God, we're not going to have the blessings we want. Even if God hasn't cast us away, though we have maybe turned our backs on Him, though as a Christian, I wouldn't advise testing God on that. But many people, in their ungodly lives, certainly. But, we want to bring forth fruit. Everyone does. Even if it isn't of the fruit that is acceptable to God, everyone wants to be fruitful in the world. In the sense the plants, they want to be productive. Or at least, even if they don't want to be working, they want to have the fruit of labor. They want to have the production of labor. Everyone wants the money, right? They want something. They want fruit. Everyone wants fruit. Everyone wants the blossoms. You need it. You eat. Even if it isn't your money, you want it. I'm just talking about people who just get money for not working. But when God takes away His blessing, that blossom, that fruit that could be, is taken away and dried up and turned to dust. All our ambitions, all our plans can crumble to dust in our hands and ashes in our mouths. Because they have cast away the law of the Lord of hosts and despised the word of God. Because they despised God's word, despised His law. Now, they're vulnerable to their enemies. Their fruits are all destroyed. Everything that they could have come upon them, everything that they feared is come upon them. Because they they violated God's covenant. They despised it. They counted it as something, and it's one thing to be ignorant, not know, and just be not part of, and just going about your life. There's a different sort of judgment there. But someone who has access to it and counts it as an unclean thing and despises it, obviously, that's a bit different because you have a special place. You have you've been given an opportunity many people have not, and to despise it will result in even, you won't receive it. You're not going to receive the blessings promised. Everyone wants the blessing, everyone wants the blossom, but the word that brings it, they don't want. The law that we must obey to have it, we don't want to obey. And I mean human beings as a whole. Individuals, we want to obey. The believers, we want to obey. We want to be pleasing to God. But humanity, the nature of us overall is not that. Humans are selfish and covetous, And the mindfulness of what God says about how we should treat other people is not entirely that important to men. And they treat it like an unclean thing. They cast it away. They despise it. Even to this day, I mean, they despise it. They don't like, I don't know what, I don't know how many times people, you know, obviously, a lot of times people get upset that God, at the suggestion that God would care or take an interest in their sexual activities. That bugs people. You know, like it would have any bearing. But what you're willing to do in your body has a lot of bearing. And with who? Therefore is the anger of the Lord kindled against his people, and he hath stretched forth his hand against them, and smitten them. And the hills did tremble, and their carcasses were torn in the midst of the streets. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. His hand is still stretched out in judgment, to punish. The hand is hovering over them, ready to smash, you know. That's not precisely the thought, but because he is in anger, he is stretching his hand out over them. His anger is not turned away. He is ready to smash, but also to restore and heal when they hearken to him, if they'd hearken to him. Of course, there does come a point where it's too late. There is a point of no return. The anger of the Lord is kindled against his people, and he has stretched forth his hand against them. The idea of stretching forth his hand. He put his hand out. There's a lot of prophetic significance in that term. It comes out all the time. God stretched forth his hand. It means he's about to do something. And has smitten them, and the hills did tremble, and their carcasses were torn in the streets. Torn up, ripped up bodies in the streets. You know, it's from the, you know, the war came. The punishment came. And for all that happened, he was still angry. It's not done yet. Because the Assyrian invasion took some time, you know, and it was like, so there was a few places that fell, and then there would be more. And he will lift up an ensign. And this phrase is going to come back to haunt us several times. And, you know, in the coming chapters, it comes back. And he will lift up an ensign to the nations from far. An ensign, I believe, is just a signal or something. Let's just... an ensign... A standard, ensign, signal, or sign, yes. He will show a sign to the nations and hiss to them from the end of the earth. Hiss refers, this is a term that refers to the way people call bees. You know, or we would say whistle, you know, probably, because it would make more sense. He would whistle for them from the end of the earth. I mean, he's going to call to them. He's going to lift up a sign to the nations. Hey, hey, come over here, listen. I can't whistle, like, you know, that kind of whip, big whistle. Hey, looky here. And they will come with speed swiftly. They're going to come. God's going to call them. And they're going to come. None shall be weary nor stumble among them. None shall slumber nor sleep. Neither shall the girdle of their loins be loosed, nor the latchet of their shoes be broken. Whose arrows are sharp, and all their bows bent. Their horses' hooves shall be counted like flint, and their wheels like a whirlwind. Their roaring shall be like a lion. Yea, they shall roar like young lions. Yea, they shall roar and lay hold of the prey, and shall carry it away safe, and none shall deliver it. So I have this, I'm sorry about the sniffing. We have this image of the army. He's going to call to the nations. This reminds me of things in the Battle of Armageddon in the New Testament. It reminds me very much of that, or of the locust army of the book of Revelation. More like the locust army, though. But there's hints of, it makes me think of Armageddon in the sense of, but Armageddon they're going to lose. This is an army which is going to be victorious because God's promising victory. I will bring them against my people. And what's that mean to us as Christians? Well, one, we should not discount the warning. If we are so careless about the covenant that Christ has made with us, if we are so cavalier, so careless, there is a degree of grievousness in our attitude towards the gospel and towards our salvation and all that faith that can be so egregious that we can end up like Ananias and Sapphira, struck dead before Peter for lying to the Holy Spirit. And that can certainly happen. So, I mean, there is a limit. If we get it in our heads that nothing, if either we, one, are false, we don't really believe, we're jerking people around with our, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, we're just fakes. That's one possible explanation, which is the most understandable, a fake. I understand what a fake would do that. But, a person who's not fake, how could they do such a thing? Well, maybe it's not from being fake so much as meaning they're not just fake Christian. I mean they're just pretending. They're just false brethren. But there's also, I don't know if Ananias and Sapphira were just unbelievers or if they just didn't take it that seriously in the sense of they believed. But there's like a defect in their belief that allows them to think they can, by fooling Peter, they will fool God. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a question of like, they're just not, because they want to be part of the church. They're still giving money. Not even asked for. They're volunteering to give money to increase their status in the church. So they want to be part of it. I don't think it's entirely from unbelief but there is some sort of unbelief in that. I'm talking about the incident in Acts when Ananias and Sapphira sold a piece of land and then they lied about it and were supernaturally slain by the Holy Spirit right in front of Peter and instantly, and it caused people to fear. So none shall weary nor stumble among them, the enemies which God can bring to bear. When it was time for Ananias and Sapphira to die, all the power in the universe was right there to kill them. You know what I mean? And God can bring our enemies against us in a very visible way that'll let us know. It's almost more merciful when he brings the armies. It's always like, wow, God's really mustering things here against us. As opposed to we just die. Because with the slow thing, there's a possibility of repentance and there's time to think about what we've done, to face the punishment. Whereas when you're struck down so quickly. So I don't know if I can spiritualize this much. Except in the sense of look at our enemies right now. It's not clear who your earthly enemies are. People, there might be for you. But there's a lot of ambiguity in the church as far as who's the enemy, who's some people think everybody's the enemy. Other people think nobody's the enemy. And that's wrong. Both counts. When you look at Christians, you're not just looking at a pile of enemies, just because they're not your kind of Christian. And neither are we, looking at, just because they're Christians, a bunch of saved folks who are our brethren. There's both, saints and sinners among us, I suppose you could say. But like the enemy, Satan, and all his powers, they never diminish. You know what I mean? Like the temptations that could take you and lead you to sin, the powers are there. They don't diminish. You know what I mean? Liquor store's still on the corner. Drug dealer's still across the street. The things that make you angry unreasonably are still there to make you angry. Everything is still in place. You know what I mean? You won't find Satan with his shoes untied. You won't find Satan with his helmet unbuckled. He won't be lacking or missing. You're not going to have a loose belt on. and have his pants fall down, and ha ha ha, Satan, you're so funny. No, the girdle of the loins shall not be loose, the latch of the shoe shall not be... mean that nothing is going to stop them. As far as they are not crippled or in any way inhibited in their mission. And so it is with the enemies. Our enemies, they are not inhibited. They are not crippled. You know what I mean? They are not in any way slowed down by any technical thing. You know what I mean? They are absolutely marching in lockstep, fearless. Their arrows are sharp, their bows are they're ready to fire at you. All the fiery darts of the wicked, in the gospel armor says, take with you the shield of faith, wherewith you may be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. Here they are. Their bows are bent, their arrows are sharp, their horses' feet they're kind of like flint, like because of the sparking coming off of them on the cobblestones, I suppose, or whatever. And the wheels like a whirlwind. The chariots and horses, and they come through. It's a frightening thing when all the horses come through, and the chariots and the machinery and all that. It's quite a lot of noise and commotion. And the idea of the horses being calmed by that their feet, their hoofs, like this hard like flint. I think just saying, just like the sound of them coming, it sounds like such a harsh sound, like flint striking. The roaring shall be like a lion. They shall roar like young lions. Yea, they shall roar, and lay hold of the prey, and shall carry it away safe, and none shall deliver it. Like a lion dragging off its prey. The Assyrians are going to invade and drag off Israel. Also in the book of Revelation, you notice when it talks about the locust army, their teeth were as the teeth of lions. They had breastplates as it were breastplates of iron. And the sound of their chariots was as the sound of many horses and many chariots going to battle. So it's not surprising that we see the same analogy here in this passage in the Old Prophet, where we have the enemies of God. They're like a lion roaring over the prey. And I don't know, like their roaring shall be like a lion. Of the enemies, obviously. And I think it means that, when I think about a lion roaring and taking a prey, I think of it as an exultant sound. I don't know why lions roar and when exactly. But from this, I take it to be their roaring like a lion will be their celebratory, over taking the prey. As far as it would seem to me that they're rejoicing over the prey, and their victory would be the roaring referred to here. And then, wow, I went going faster than I thought. And in that day they shall roar against them like the roaring of the sea. And if one look to the land, behold darkness and sorrow, and the light is darkened in the heavens thereof. They'll roar against them, against Israel, like the roaring of the sea, like this powerful, unstoppable force. The sea is always used as an analogy of something that's just huge and powerful and beyond man's, it's the most vast thing we could really look at up close. Like you can get right up to the ocean. You can look at a mountain. Mountains also used for big things, but the sea is more than, a mountain is like a thing, but the sea is like a force. And it's a mystery. There's so much about the sea that is more and bigger than land features. As far as the land is usually broken up into the sea. Into the things like mountains and hills and plains and valleys. Though there is like the earth, right? And honestly, when I think about it, it makes me wonder, if they thought, because they would say the earth. I guess there's just a lot of interesting play between the earth and the sea in the Old Testament. The earth is often, I believe the word eretz refers to the dry land, technically, just in a technical sense. But and also so it refers to the planet as a whole. Just the way we talk about Earth. Like Earth is the planet Earth, but it's also this black stuff I hold in my hand. If I had some. I have some dirt. It's another word for dirt. Another word for dirt is earth. Like we have earthworks, it works in the dirt. So, if one looked to the land, darkness and sorrow. So we have the sea on one side, roaring, the enemy. And again, the reason the sea and the enemy also come together is because, like even in the book of Revelation, symbolically, they had the waters which thou sawest are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And when it talks about an enemy roaring like the roaring of the sea, it just means when you have a huge commotion of people, like an army, it's a noise. There is a murmur and a roar. Oh, especially as people get louder and stuff. When they, in the midst of the victory, they're cheering and excitement about invading a city, they would be very loud, very roaring. And the Assyrians were also very brutal. I mean, they come through and they murder people after they, just absolutely reveling in the destruction and mayhem they cause. So looking in the land, darkness and sorrow, and the light is darkened in the heavens thereof. Because why not? With the sea roaring against it. And that's likened to this army of the enemies coming against Israel. When the sea is roaring and the enemies are there, like if you turn around, look, what do you think you're going to see? You know what I mean? Like let's say, imagine you got a city, right? And it's it's completely surrounded by armies. No way in, no way out. They're besieged. And the army is roaring and making battle. What do you suppose you're going to see on the face of the city, people? See a lot of despair, a lot of misery, a lot of darkness and sorrow. And whatever light they hope for, they see there were some people that thought, God will deliver us. And God had said, no, I won't. None shall deliver it. The light is darkened in the heavens. Even the light is dark. The idea that which should have provided light and illumination is darkened. Even the things which could have brought happiness are made into sadness because everything's being destroyed. The vineyard was planted. The Lord planted a vineyard, and the vineyard brought forth wicked fruit. And therefore, God said, hey, remember, like when we go back to that root of rottenness, I forgot to mention this because I thought of it earlier when I was thinking about the Bible study. Actually, it was yesterday. The root of rottenness, we're talking about a vineyard here, right? A vine. And the vine is very dependent on the root. A vine is, they prune them aggressively. I mean, they cut them way back to just a couple feet of vine, and then it regrows. So the root is very critical in the vine. Well, the branch too, but it's very, so it's a very good analogy. Because I guess we should go on to chapter 6. I didn't really want to start chapter 6 in the middle of another chapter, but I'm not going to end the Bible study 15 minutes early. That's all right. We'll pick it up. We'll pick it up in the middle of chapter 6 tomorrow. Let's read it now. I don't know how well that's going to work, but we'll see. Chapter 6 is definitely a new chapter. Unlike I said 3 and 4, there was no obvious chapter division. 5, it seemed like a new thought. 6, definitely time for a new thought here. In the year that King Uzziah died, remember before we were prophesying in the days of King Uzziah. Well, now Uzziah is dead. Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz. So now Jotham, his son, will take the throne. Uzziah, Ahaz. Where's Ahaz, Uzziah? Is it Ahaz, Uzziah? I forgot. Whatever. Alright. Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah. Ahaz is the father of Hezekiah, I believe, not Jotham. Okay. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up. and his train filled the temple. Above it stood the Seraphims, each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he did fly. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the posts of the door moved at the voice of him that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. Then said I. It's one of my favorite songs that I've written was for Isaiah 6, and I like reading it every time I read it. So it was the year that Isaiah died. He saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, in the temple. Imagine this big temple complex. Usually this vaulted ceiling was a very high ceiling building. And then there was no throne in it, but he saw God on a throne in the temple, high and lifted up. And his train filled the temple, the train of his garment, but being whatever's trailing behind. And for God, the train could represent his glory, his whatever. There was some sort of train coming down from God. Whether that was like a garment or some sort of overflowing of glory, a visual for Isaiah to know what he was looking at. And it fills up the temple. It was just filled with the glory of the Lord. And above this throne he saw the Seraphims. Something that's never been mentioned really before. Seraphim means burning one. The burning ones. Probably meaning because of the brightness with which they give off. They give off a brightness round about them. The Seraphims, each one have 6 wings. Wait, is it seraphim mean burning one? Or am I thinking of... No, seraphim does mean seraph. Yeah, seraph means burning one. It refers sometimes to a particular kind of snake, which can refer to the burning of the venom. Or the... And there's a lot of... Like, there's another word for shaf, nachash, which means the shining one. So, each one had 6 wings. With 20 covered his face, with 20 covered his feet, with 20 did fly. So the Seraphims have 3 pairs of wings. 3 pairs, 6. 2 over his face, 2 over his, hands? Oh, feet. Feet. He covers his feet and his face with his wings, and then the third pair is flying. Very strange thing to see. I mean, it would be very, obviously memorable. I'm going to see if I can do something about that. All right. This is actually probably pretty stupid, but... And I'm doing this. All right. Sorry about this. This probably... I had a pencil, I dropped it. Okay, that didn't work out so good. Ow. Ow, 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 ow. Oh, great. Ow. My foot. Ow. My foot got snagged on a nail or something. Okay. Well, so much for that little adventure. We won't be fixing that noise. One thing I've mentioned before, I need a new video card. So, because that fan can't be replaced. It's in the video card. I mean, it could be replaced by an expert, and I need an identical fan, but I don't know where to get it. Okay. I don't find a lot to comment on that. It's interesting that they have 6 wings. It's like because it's an earthly number. The symbolic nature of numbers, I should say, in the symbolic nature of numbers, in the symbolic study of numbers, 6 has been come to be associated as the number of man, like we have the number of the beast. But when you see the number crop up symbolically, it has often carried with it certain connotations of earthly, human things, and in those places. So then it makes you look at this and you think like, well, maybe this is similar. I mean, certainly they are. They cry, holy, holy, holy 3 times, which is the number of the earth is considered 4. The number of man is considered 6. The number of 3 is considered a divine number, like 7. And so the holy, 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 the 3 times for emphasis and also for the Trinity and all that, as far as that's the way we would look at it as Christians. The Lord of hosts, the whole earth is full of his glory. The world is filled with God's glory. This is something the scriptures say over and over again. The heavens declare the majesty of God. The earth contains his works. There's a testimony of the heavens and the earth, which testify to the glory of God. And it's there for everyone to see, though not everyone sees it. People don't see the world as the product of the glory of God. Many people see it as the product of random chance. But I mean, that is purely a subjective consideration. Like, what you see things as is no indication of what it really is. Meaning the fact that I perceive something to be something does not mean that's what it really is, just because it's perceived by my senses. Even if, it does not, we have learned to trust our senses. We trust our eyes and ears, right? We do scientific studies. And we use our senses to take in the information. We take a reading, like maybe we make an instrument, right? We make an instrument, and then we read it with our eyes, and we put down, we construe these instruments and tools with our minds, and we write them down. We use our senses and our ability to understand, our natural things that God has given us, and we come up with conclusions about the world. But everything we're thinking is based on our own subjective observations, which are not as objective as we think we all are observing an objective universe. But it's not entirely clear that that's a safe assumption. Just because our senses generally reveal consistent results. Meaning, I can expect if I take this little charger and I drop it, it's going to fall. I can predict that. If I open my fingers up, it's going to drop right to the ground. Look at that. There it went. No surprises there. I trust my senses, and we are wise to trust our senses to a certain degree. But they only take us so far. There's some levels of understanding and wisdom which we cannot achieve through our senses. At least not, you may confirm them through the senses, but you're not going to sense them out. Finally quiet down. Oh. That sound makes me feel like I'm urging, or just rushing to finish, because I just want it to stop. Okay. But people don't all see God. They don't all see this glorious work of God in the world. They see other things through their senses. They see, they look at the world and they interpret it through the lens of evolution or through the lens of whatever, but they don't see God's handiwork. Noise. But nevertheless, it's there if we want to see it. If God reveals it to us, we can see that the world is filled with God's glory. It's an amazing world. No matter what our senses tell us about it, the message that it is astonishing and amazing should get through. We take it as entirely too mundane. The marvels of existence. Like, existing is a marvelous, amazing thing. To be able to touch solid objects, to be able to interact with liquids, to be able, think about when you're a kid, like they let you play with some strange thing, like silly putty or whatever, or slime. But you think about it, like all these strange properties of things, and we hand children toys and things to manipulate and experience the world, and it's an amazing experience. But we get so used to it that we take it for granted, and we start losing the marvel of it. And we start just looking at it mechanistically and how it works and saying that's all it is. All it is the mechanism of how it works. And science has sort of gotten this idea that if we can understand how things work and how they come to be, that we understand them. But that is not necessarily so. That the function of a thing is not necessarily the entirety of the thing. And just because you observe a function doesn't mean that is the entirety of all functions. I mean, just there's so much possible, and science is more about it's about taking observations, conducting experiments, repeating them, following the scientific method, learning things. Nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't make a good life philosophy for a human being. And no one lives by science. Can't live by science. It's a tool. It's like living by the hammer. I mean, live by the hammer, die by the hammer. Live by science, die by science. No doubt. Well, that's why it says, he that kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. I think, actually, I've just gained a new insight on that. You could put it, and I should know, like, I've heard people say it about other things. You live by one, you die by the same thing. And this idea is if you put all your eggs in one basket, it's also going to be your vulnerability. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. You live by crime, you die by crime. You live a life of crime, you end up badly. You do things like that. Same thing all over the place. If you live by the word of God, you will live. You will die by it and also obtain the resurrection. It's like you will die by what you live by, because we're going to live and die no matter what. So how we live is important, and how we die, well, it matters to us. It's not that important in the world how we die necessarily. It could be. It could be important to people. I mean, it could be important to your family how you die. You want to die a coward's death, pleading for your life in the face of the enemy, or do you want to bravely face your end and serve the living God? It's not so easy to be brave, And they say all this, and then the posts of the door move at the voice of him that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. They create this, it's this glorious image of these strange angels with 6 wings flying above this throne, and the Lord himself sitting upon it. And they're letting you know who's there, and he's filling it up with his glorious train. And they cry to each other, and the posts move. The temple, this big structure that probably seems immovable. You ever been in a big building, like a museum or something, with the big columns, the big Roman architecture type style, and it feels like those things feel so grounded and solid and just immovable. But they can move. They can be moved. One thing that's truly immovable is God. God is immovable. If he wants to be. In the sense of he can be absolutely immobile. It's not that he does. But God moves, God moves, but no one moves him. And certainly not in a causal sense. And also not in the sense of, because we can move God in a spiritual sense. I just mean in a sense of causal. Because ultimately, in a spiritual sense, if I move God, it's also because he moved on me first. And there's no two ways about that. Because I couldn't move. Without God moving on me, how could I move towards him? I don't know him. I can't find him. I know nothing about. If I'm just thrown in the world without any knowledge of God, without anyone to teach me, without anyone to preach to me, I'm not. I will marvel at the world and probably marvel at, have a sense of God, but I will not know him. I need to know it. The voice of the angel shaking the post, filling the house with smoke. And his reaction, woe is me, I'm undone. We will pick that up in the next study. We're going to start chapter 6, verse 5. And we'll pick it up there, okay? So we're done. Yeah, I realize I keep looking at the live time, which is actually a few minutes ahead of the record time, which yesterday we actually ended a little earlier. Now it's 6:58. Or I'm sorry, it's 58 minutes in. That's 6:58. I don't do a 6 o'clock Bible study. So, so we're done. And we'll pick it up at verse 5. So next time, let's see, is there anything else? No. Well, actually, there was one thing I wanted to do. Let's just get there. All right. And it's worth waiting for. Alrighty. Oh. It's funny how and I just want to get a little different outro music here. Oh, whatever. I'll have it next time. Where's my Here we go. Oh, I only have one clip from it here. Here we go. We'll be back tomorrow.